Ever pondered how the world decided the fate of those behind one of the most horrific genocides in history? Today we delve into the Nuremberg Trials, a pivotal chapter in the aftermath of World War II. These unprecedented trials, grappling with the immense moral dilemma of rendering justice for unthinkable atrocities, were an odyssey in their own right. They marked a momentous shift in the global understanding of war crimes and their repercussions. This is the story of how justice was sought for the victims of the Holocaust through the Nuremberg Trials. In the ruins of Nuremberg, a city symbolic of Nazi power, the world was watching. Nuremberg, once the crown jewel of Hitler's Reich, lay in ruins, its grandeur reduced to rubble. Yet, its significance to the Nazi regime was exactly why it was chosen as the stage for one of the most important trials in history. The city that had once hosted massive Nazi rallies was now to witness the reckoning for the atrocities of the Second World War. This was no ordinary trial. It was the first of its kind, a grand spectacle that would redefine international law. The International Military Tribunal, as it was called, was composed of members from the four victorious powers of the war: the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and France. Each nation contributed a judge, a deputy judge, and a prosecutor, creating a diverse panel that represented the collective outrage of a world still reeling from the horrors of war. The tribunal was a symbol of unity, a testament to the shared resolve of these nations to bring the perpetrators of these heinous crimes to justice. The judges and prosecutors, though hailing from different legal traditions and backgrounds, were united in their purpose: to ensure that those responsible for the war and its atrocities would be held accountable. The selection of Nuremberg was not merely symbolic. It was also practical. Its Palace of Justice was one of the few buildings that remained largely intact after the war, equipped with a large courtroom and an adjacent prison. It was here that 22 of the most prominent Nazi leaders, including Hermann Göring, Rudolf Hess, and Joachim von Ribbentrop, would be tried for crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. This was a trial that would set precedents, shape international law, and define the very concept of justice in the aftermath of war. It was a stage unlike any other, and the world watched with bated breath as the defendants were led into the dock. The stage was set, the defendants were in the dock, and the world waited for justice. The charges were grave, the indictment unprecedented. The Nuremberg trials brought forth 4 key charges against the defendants. These were not your everyday criminal charges. They were profound, deeply rooted in international law, and intricately tied to the very fabric of human ethics. The first charge was of conspiracy. This was the accusation that the defendants had plotted and schemed, working together to commit the atrocities that had shocked the world. The second charge, crimes against peace, was leveled against those who had played a direct role in instigating the war, breaking the peace that the world so desperately clung to. Then came the charge of war crimes. This allegation targeted actions that violated the laws and customs of war, including the ill treatment of civilians and prisoners of war. But it was the fourth charge, the charge of crimes against humanity, that truly broke new ground. This term, crimes against humanity, was coined specifically for the Nuremberg trials. It was an attempt to encapsulate the magnitude of the horrors that had occurred. These crimes were not merely against individuals, or even against nations. They were against humanity itself. They were acts so vile, so inhumane that they transcended borders and cultures, reaching into the very core of our shared human experience. These were the charges: conspiracy, crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Each one a damning accusation, each one a stark reminder of the dark depths to which humanity could sink. The defendants stood accused not merely of breaking laws, but of shattering the very principles that underpin our collective existence. But the implications of these charges went even further. They were not merely an indictment against the individuals on trial. They were, in essence, a trial of war itself, a probing examination of the nature of conflict and the atrocities it inevitably breeds. The indictment was clear. The defendants were not just on trial for their actions, but for the very nature of war itself. This was a trial that would forever change our understanding of justice, of responsibility, and of the very essence of humanity. Opening: how does one defend the indefensible? Let's delve into the defense strategies, a task that was as daunting as it was controversial. The defense attorneys, bearing the weight of an enormous ethical burden, were faced with the challenge of defending those accused of heinous war crimes. It was a tightrope walk, where they had to balance the scales of justice against the backdrop of public sentiment and overwhelming evidence. One of the most notable defense strategies was the infamous following orders argument, which was commonly known as the superior orders defense. This defense asserted that the accused were merely following the orders of their superiors, and thus were not personally responsible for the atrocities committed. However, this strategy was met with resistance. The prosecution argued that individuals have a moral responsibility to refuse to carry out orders that result in crimes against humanity. The defense had a tough task countering this argument, given the severity of the crimes and the global outrage that followed. In addition, the defense attorneys had to grapple with the challenge of humanizing their clients in the eyes of the court, a task made difficult by the enormity of the crimes committed. They had to present their clients not as monsters, but as men who had gone astray under the weight of war. Closing, the defense did their duty, even in the face of overwhelming evidence and public sentiment. The world held its breath as the verdict was about to be delivered. The weight of the world hung heavy in the courtroom, the air thick with anticipation. The Nuremberg Trials were not just about bringing justice to the victims of the Second World War. They were about setting a precedent, establishing a new order where individuals would be held accountable for their actions, even in the fog of war. The verdicts were met with a mix of shock, relief, and for some a sense of vindication. The sentences ranged from death to imprisonment, and in some cases, acquittals. Of the 22 major war criminals tried, 12 were sentenced to death, including Hermann Göring, Hitler's right-hand man, and Joachim von Ribbentrop, the foreign minister. 7 were handed prison sentences, ranging from 10 years to life. 3, however, were acquitted, a decision that sparked controversy and debate. These verdicts were monumental, not just for their immediate impact, but for the lasting precedent they set. For the first time in history, individuals were held accountable on an international stage for crimes committed during wartime. This was a radical shift from the past, where such atrocities were often brushed under the rug, dismissed as the unfortunate byproducts of war. The Nuremberg Trials signaled a new era of accountability. They laid the foundation for modern international law and the establishment of the International Criminal Court. They set the stage for future trials and tribunals, ensuring that those who commit war crimes cannot hide behind the shield of their government or military rank. The verdicts handed down in that courtroom reverberated around the world, sending a clear message. War does not absolve individuals of their actions. No longer could one escape justice by claiming to be a mere cog in the machine of war. The Nuremberg Trials marked a turning point in international law, forever changing how we deal with war crimes. The reverberations of the Nuremberg Trials continue to echo today. These trials, taking place in the aftermath of one of the most devastating wars in history, set a precedent that would forever change the way we approach justice on a global scale. The Nuremberg Trials were indeed a watershed moment, marking the first time in human history that individuals, the leaders of a fallen regime, were held accountable for war crimes on such a grand scale. The trials established the principle of individual accountability, a concept that was previously unheard of. No longer could leaders hide behind the veil of their government or military, claiming immunity from their actions. This was a seismic shift in the realm of international law. But the legacy of Nuremberg extends beyond the principle of individual accountability. The trials also laid the groundwork for the establishment of the International Criminal Court, or the ICC. The ICC, now based in The Hague, Netherlands, continues to prosecute individuals for genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes, following in the footsteps of the Nuremberg Trials. Moreover, the Nuremberg Trials set a precedent for future war crimes trials. The trials in Tokyo, the former Yugoslavia, and Rwanda all borrowed elements from Nuremberg, underscoring its enduring influence. In each of these instances, the world saw a reiteration of the Nuremberg principles, that leaders can be held accountable, that justice can be delivered on an international scale, and that even in the face of unspeakable horrors, humanity's pursuit of justice remains undeterred. The trials were not perfect and they were not without controversy, but they were a crucial step forward in the evolution of international law and justice. They served as a stark reminder of humanity's capacity for evil, but also its relentless pursuit of justice. The Nuremberg Trials stand as a stark reminder of humanity's capacity for evil, but also its relentless pursuit of justice.